And that was on the 6th or so of April. And when she got there, she's a Tutsi woman, they had to go into hiding because the killing began almost immediately, especially in this area of Rwanda where she lived. And she went into hiding in a pastor's home, in a bathroom that is approximately 3 foot by 4 foot, with 7 other women for 91 days. And she came out, she's 5'9", she came out and she weighed 65 pounds. And she survived through something that is so miraculous. She has written her story in a book called Left to Tell, How I Discovered God in the Midst of the Rwandan Genocide. It was such an astonishing experience that she would survive through the force of her total belief and connection to God. It was almost as if she had to become that from which she originated. She had to learn not only what God was like in her thoughts, and when you read her book, you'll be just overwhelmed. It's a page-turning book. But she had to almost learn how to be in a state of forgiveness to people who were hunting her. She lived in a house that was a 2-bedroom bungalow by standards in America, and it was searched by between 300 and 400 Hutus with machetes 5 inches away from where she and 7 other women were hiding, just looking for scraps of food in order to survive, being brought to her by the pastor. And in the home that she lived, the pastor didn't even tell his own children, because if he would, they would have been killed, because no Tutsis were spared. None. I'm going to read the introduction. And I met this woman. She came to a talk I gave, and I was so deeply inspired by her transcendent connection to source energy that she was able to transcend the laws of the material world. She was literally able to face down, after weighing 65 pounds and 91 days wearing the same clothes without having a bath or washing, stare down someone with God consciousness and have them drop a machete, and it was unheard of. I believe that she's a saint who walks among us. I heard the killers call my name. They were on the other side of the wall. Less than an inch of plaster and wood separated us. Their voices were cold, hard, and determined. She's here. We know she's here somewhere. Find her. Find Immaculée, they were saying. There were many voices and many killers. I could see them in my mind. My former friends and neighbors who had always greeted me with love and kindness now moved through the house calling my name while carrying spears and machetes. I've killed 399 cockroaches, said one of the killers. Immaculée will make 400. It's a good number to kill. I cowered in the corner of our tiny secret bathroom without moving a muscle. Like the 7 other women hiding for their lives with me, I held my breath so the killers wouldn't hear me breathing. Their voices clawed at my flesh. I felt like I was lying on a bed of burning coals, like I'd been set on fire. A sweeping wind of pain engulfed my body. 1,000 invisible needles were ripping into me. I never dreamed fear could cause such agonizing physical pain. I tried to swallow, but my throat closed up. I had no saliva. My mouth was drier than sand. I closed my eyes and tried to make myself disappear, but their voices just grew louder. I knew they would have no mercy. My mind echoed with only one thought: if they catch me, they will kill me. If they catch me, they will kill me. They were just outside the door. At any second, they would find me. I wondered what it was going to feel like when the machete slashed through my skin and cut deep into my bones. I thought of my brother, like when the machete slashed through my skin and cut deep into my bones. I thought of my brothers and my dear parents, wondering if they were dead or alive, and if we would soon be together in heaven. I put my hands together, clasped my father's rosary, and began to pray. Please, God, please, please help me. Do not let me die like this. Not like this. Not like this. Don't let these killers find me. You tell us in the Bible that if we ask, we will receive. Well, God, I'm asking. Please make these killers go away. Please don't let me die in this bathroom. Please, God, please. The killers moved from the house and we all began to breathe again. They were gone, but they would be back many times over the next 3 months. I believe God had spared my life, but I would learn over the next 91 days as I hid trembling in fear with 7 women in a 3-foot by 4-foot bathroom that being spared is much different than being saved. But I did learn it, and it was a lesson that has forever changed me. A lesson that in the midst of mass murder taught me how to love those who hated and hunted me, and how to forgive those who slaughtered my family. My name is Immaculée Ilibagiza, and this is the story of how I discovered God during one of history's bloodiest genocides. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Immaculée Ilibagiza to the stage.
Thank you for your kind welcome. I'm very proud and very happy to be here on this PBS program taping. And of course, I'm very happy to be with Dr. Wayne again.
Thank you.
I know my story is a sad story, but it has been a story that gave me an experience of great spiritual growth and a deep understanding of what really matters in life. It is a story of everyone who lives through any kind of injustice. I believe that also it has given me a chance to love better and to be able to put myself in other people's skin, especially when they are hurt. I always tell Wayne that if maybe he was in my country before the genocide, teaching what he teaches today, maybe the genocide would not have taken place. And I hope everyone knows, and America knows, what a gift they have to have him. Sitting down in deep silence of that bathroom for 3 months and being hunted to be killed every day through the worst time of my life, I didn't know that I was about to discover the greatest source of joy in my own heart, which was God inside. He is bigger than any pain. There are a few things I would like to share with you. I know that we can learn to forgive. Do not let your heart be disturbed because of any pain. I see sometimes people take a chance to hurt each other, for example, fighting over a job promotion. But one thing I have learned is that when you hurt another person, you hurt yourself in one way or another. The most important thing I learned in that bathroom is that you can't hate people if they are struggling with the truth. As the Bible said, they do not know what they do. After I got out of the bathroom, I learned that my mom, my dad, my two brothers, my schoolmates, my relatives, my neighbors. Everyone was dead. Every material belongings I cherished, it was destroyed. I learned that to every pain, there is a great purpose. I have learned a lot during those 3 months, and I knew that those lessons can help me to face the pain that I was going to go through. And I chose only to look at that. And as Anne Frank said in her diary, I still believe deep down in my heart that people are good at heart. And do not let yourself give up mankind. I know peace is possible. Thank you.
The third of these rewards for reaching an inspired life is that your consciousness expands in every direction. What does this mean? Your consciousness expands in every direction. It means there's no up and there's no down. It means there's no right and there's no wrong. It means that there's no north and there's no south. It means that there's no beginning and no end. You begin to move into a consciousness place within yourself that you'll find yourself, when you move into spirit, you're going to find yourself doing things that you don't understand why you're doing them. In 1994, when Immaculée was imprisoned in this tiny little bathroom with 7 other people with no facilities, she did something that I found so astounding when I first met her, when she came to a lecture I had given in New York. And I was so taken by her. She didn't come to me and say, "Will you help me?" I sought her out and said, "How may I be of service to telling your story in a profound way?" And what she did when she entered that bathroom is she asked the pastor whose home she was in, "Do you have an English and a French dictionary?" And she learned English while she was being hunted to be killed. For what reason? Why would someone who is in that kind of a state practice, day in and day out, up to 8, 10 hours, and she couldn't speak. They didn't speak for 91 days. No sound whatsoever. So 5 years later, she is a survivor. She represents less than 0.5% of the Tutsi women of Rwanda who survived. All the rest were killed. She went into a place within herself and taught herself a language that she was going to need 5 years from now. That's what I mean by your consciousness expands in every direction. And then 5 years later, in 1999 or 2000, she had when she was here in America on an asylum visa, married, living out on Long Island, has 2 children, is assimilated into our culture, is a great spokesperson for transcending hatred on the planet. She woke every day, 3 o'clock in the morning, before she went to work at the UN, and wrote every little detail of what happened in those 91 days. 150,000 words she wrote and gave that to me 5 years after that. And I said, "Immaculée, it's wonderful, but your native language is Kinyarwanda, your second language is French, your third language, so we got help in helping her to convert it into language that would be." But how did she know in 1994 that she was going to be in America and coming up on on a stage like this and talking to our country in a language that is her third language. How did she know that? Your consciousness expands in every direction. When you have an inkling, when you have, like Ryan, when you have a feeling within you that this is something that you have to do, that you can't be stopped from doing it, the whole world changes. And you start, and you listen to it. And you find yourself, if someone hands you a book, and then someone else talks about that book, and then someone else mentions it, and then you see the author on television, and all of a sudden you start saying, wait a minute, I've got to listen to this. I am being directed. I'm being called. I trust in this. I totally, completely trust. Your consciousness expands in every direction when you enter the world of spirit, and you get yourself pulled in these directions, and you allow yourself to be pulled in that way. That's what I mean by your consciousness expands in every direction. Nothing is impossible. And whatever you find yourself doing, that's what you allow yourself to do and what you allow yourself to be. There's a great quote, again, by Rumi. He's just one of the greatest. Every tree and plant in the meadow seemed to be dancing. Those which average eyes would see as fixed and still. That's what happens when your consciousness expands in every direction. You see, you understand the Tao. The Tao is like it's the silence between the notes that makes the music. It's the space between the bars that holds the tiger. You're a sculptor and you sculpt yourself a vase. And what do you think makes the vase? What makes the vase is not the tile, and it's not the substance of the material. It's the inner space within there that is surrounding it. Without that inner space within, there can be no vase. And without that inner space within you, there's no you. You're not skin and bone and all that. You are, that encapsulates an inner silence, an inner place that is totally and completely yours, uniquely yours. Your consciousness expands in every direction. When you do, you start practicing things like kindness, where judgment was before. I've often said that when you have a choice to be right or to be kind, just pick kind. Why? Because it's more closely aligned with your spirit. You begin to exude something called love. You feel it for everyone. Believe it or not, at the end of Immaculate's book, she goes to the prison where the people who were her killers, one was her mathematics teacher. And what happens is that you begin to embrace a kind of love even for the people who would do such harm to you. And I'm telling you, that's what saved her. You'll see that when you read it. That's what saved her. The ability to go to that place within, that place of forgiveness. As Mark Twain said, forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. Powerful thinking. You become an instrument of truth. You become powerful thinking. You become an instrument of truth. You become someone who listens. You become someone who is God realized. Okay? Your consciousness expands in every direction. I want to tell you something that I think will be very, very helpful to you. I want you to think about the troublemakers in your life. I want you to think about the troubled ones in your life. I want you to think about the ones in your life that are hooked on drugs. I want you to think about the ones who don't cooperate, the ones who don't fit in, the ones who perhaps are disrespectful, use language that you don't approve of, use substances that you find difficult, people that perhaps you work at. But mostly, I want you to think about people like that in your family. Now, I know that you think it's always somebody else, but they're thinking of you. And I want to tell you about how consciousness expands in every direction when you take these people who are your greatest teachers, the people who have come into your life to teach you how to love them through what it is that they're struggling with, what it is that they are going through. It's just, there's a need there, a need to be loved, that it's very difficult to love certain people under certain circumstances in certain ways, particularly when they behave in ways that are so troublesome to you. And I want to take you back in my own family, and I've been given permission to do this. One of my children who got herself into that kind of a state as a teenager and struggled with her own self and her own addictions and her own fears. And the process over a longer period of time, I called together a family meeting. And I put everybody in the family together, and I had everybody in the family tell her how her behavior was affecting everyone else. And each person went through and talked about how difficult it was. I went through and talked about how I couldn't sleep, and it was, and her mom told her about how worried she was and how scared she was and how upset she was. And we went through this whole thing with this wonderful, beautiful child. And that night she went out and behaved in the same ways that she'd been behaving all along. Almost as if to say, I just don't need to hear how bad I am any longer. And I want to tell you something that I learned since then. I've talked to my daughter about this, and today she's this soul who devotes a big part of her life to helping people who were as troubled as she was at one time. Divinely beautiful, beautiful young lady. I want to tell you about a woman. Her name was Peace Pilgrim. Peace Pilgrim was a woman, an elderly woman who walked around the country, and all she did, dressed in white, was go into different communities, and she would just talk about peace. That's all she did. She talked peace wherever she went. And in the process of talking peace, there would be no ads, and no one knew her name. She was just called Peace Pilgrim. I believe there's a website about Peace Pilgrim today. And I was in touch with Peace Pilgrim. And then it turns out she had read some of my books, and we had communicated. And then one day she was walking along the highway to another town, and she was killed by a car that didn't see her. It was an accident, and she died. But she left a journal behind. And in her journal, Peace Pilgrim, this woman who devoted her life to peace, talked about the Bamemba tribe in South Africa. And I want to share this with you because this could be one way of returning spirit to the place in your home where there's emptiness, where there's hurt, where there's pain, where there's fear, where there's anger, where there's worry. In the Bamemba tribe, Peace Pilgrim says, when a person acts irresponsibly or unjustly, he or she is placed in the center of the village, alone and unfettered. All the work ceases. The entire village gathers around the accused individual. Then each person of every age begins to talk out loud to the accused. One at a time, each person tells all of the good things the one in the center ever did in his or her lifetime. Every incident, every experience that can be recalled with any detail and accuracy is recounted. All positive attributes, good deeds, strengths, and acts of kindness are recited carefully and at length. No one is permitted to fabricate, to exaggerate, or to be facetious about the accomplishments or the positive aspects of the accused person. The tribal ceremony often lasts several days, not ceasing until everyone is drained of every positive comment that can be mustered. At the end, the tribal circle is broken, a joyous celebration takes place, and the person is symbolically welcomed back into the tribe. Necessity for such ceremonies is rare. Now, I'd like to think about that in terms of what I learned since the family meeting that I called a decade or so ago. If I were to do it over, I would place this beautiful child in the center of that circle, and I would have everyone talk about the wonderful things about her, about however, wherever we go, she just always thinks about the downtrodden. Dad, can we just take some donuts out to these workers, these migrant workers? They never get to have just some. Can't we just go over there? Come on, Dad, let's just take them some donuts. Can't we just do something nice for this person? I would tell them about the time that she went over on Mother's Day and bought a little trinket for her mom and wrote a little poem next to it. I would talk about how she made us laugh all the time when she was a baby, and with that little tongue of hers and the little words that she made up and that funny little way that she walked and her own sense of independence. And we would go on and on and on with this. And if we can teach those who are troubled, those who cause us pain, those who use language that we don't approve of, those who dress in ways, those who do things to their bodies that we don't think they should do, if we can just immerse them in a culture of acceptance and love, even if they're behaving in ways that seem so anathema to you, if you can just find a way to continue to do that, eventually that spirit has to raise, and your consciousness expands in every direction. And 4, you find yourself in a new and a great and a wonderful world. Your world changes. The world that you used to live in before you were in spirit is no longer there. When you're touched deeply by living in spirit, by awakening with the morning breeze, by catching every thought that you have that is not one of God realization, by finding yourself saying over and over and over again, it is my intention to be in this state of God realization. It is my intention to be there. I'm going to live in spirit. When you do, the world changes. Things that you didn't notice before suddenly come alive. I'm going to tell you a story that just blew me away. I think it perhaps was the signature story of my life in terms of connecting to spirit. I've never experienced anything like this before. I finished writing Inspiration, Your Ultimate Calling, on the 23rd of April. And I knew that the book was going to have 18 chapters in it, because 18 is that magical number, one infinite source. One infinite source. I put that number on my dashboard of my car. I have it on the mirror. It's a reminder. One infinite source, 18. It's the number of chapters in the Bhagavad Gita. It's the number of holes on a golf course. It's got to have something holy to it. And so I had 17 chapters written, and I was thrilled to have that completed, but I still had one chapter to go, but I was holding that off until my birthday on the 10th of May. And I knew what that last chapter was going to be, my experience of living an inspired life, just telling it on my birthday, right around 3:13 or so in the morning. So I was essentially done. And I went for a walk that day, and when I finished that chapter, that 17th chapter, I told a story in there about my friend Jack Boland. He passed away about 12 years ago. Jack was a Unity minister in Detroit, a man who, when I wrote Your Erroneous Zones 3 decades ago, called me up and asked me if he could put together some tapes on it, and would I give him permission. And he had started a Unity church over on the east side of Detroit, and asked me if he could use that. I said, absolutely. And over the years, I began to speak at his church and his congregation, and come to Detroit a lot, my home, and we became very close. We became like brothers. And he got very sick, and he had cancer throughout his back and so on. And I went with him to my friend Deepak Chopra's place, the Ayurveda Center out in Massachusetts. During the day, we would go out, and then in the evening, he would come in, and Jack always had to have a story. He had to tell a story. And he started talking to me about these wonderful little creatures called monarch butterflies, and how much he loved them. And the reason that he loved them, he said, Wayne, these are the most amazing little things in the world. I mean, they've got a brain the size of a pinprick, just no brain, essentially, and they're made out of tissue paper, you know, like toilet paper. They're just flimsy little things, and they come out, and they come out of a chrysalis on a branch in a tree in Brazil.